The world is an ever-changing place. If you went back in time and brought yourself from 10 years ago to this very moment, I wholeheartedly believe your past self would be shocked speechless. And not just because there was time traveling involved. Hi, my name is Noe Romero, and I'm a recent graduate from Arlington High School. But today I hope to talk to you all about something kind of big and important. So, bear with me, please. At a time like this, when a global pandemic is taking over the earth and dominating the headlines, it is easy to let other things fall through the cracks. In fact, history has proven that it is always easy to let the ugliness of the world fall through the cracks. It is so much easier to ignore things you do not want to have to deal with. I cannot relate to this statement more, and if you don't believe me, you can ask that pile of laundry that I threw in my closet, because I didn't want to put it away yet. And if you ask my mom, she would say that it would just be so much easier in the long run if I just put it away. And while she is conveniently wrong about my chores, she may be onto something else. So many of us ignore or are simply not exposed to social injustices that take place all over the world all the time. The ugliness of the world, if you will. Now, I'm not saying this to shame anyone, for I'm just as guilty as the next person, but I simply want to shed light on this topic, to open some eyes to the citizens of the world so we can see everyone and everything, no matter how horrifying it may be. Because only then can we solve anything and push towards real progress. Mind you, this is so vague, but only because it applies to so much. Way back when I was a kid, I became obsessed with this cartoon television show called Avatar: The Last Airbender, a show based on a comic book that clearly highlighted Asian characters and culture. When the show ended and my younger self watched the finale, I was excited to see the end, but obviously sad that it was over. So when I caught wind of a movie coming out, could not contain my excitement. However, I honestly wasn't a fan of the movie, and judging by author Gene Yang's graphic essay, Why I Won't Be Watching The Last Airbender, I don't believe he's a fan either. Here I was, shaking my head in disappointment, for M. Night Shyamalan completely ruined the Avatar story for me through his adaptation. But this is where Yang and I saw it differently. I was disappointed in the accuracy of the storyline, whereas Yang saw the bigger problem. This wonderful celebration of Asian culture in this clearly Asian-based setting with amazing Asian characters was being portrayed by an entirely white cast. The cast and crew made it clear, and I quote, Asian American faces are simply inadequate for American audiences, even in a movie that so obviously celebrates our cultural heritage. Herein lies the true issue, and the root of it. The real issue is that I never saw that. I never even noticed or knew that this massive, racist, and disgusting injustice was taking place. All I saw was that they pronounced a character's name wrong. And in this way, I was the root of the problem. Not that I'm special or anything. We're all the root of the problem. I know for a fact that each and every person on this planet who's been born or who will be born contributes to this level of ignorance. Sometimes it cannot be helped, and that's where we cannot be ashamed of ourselves. But we are given opportunities, amazing chances to enlighten ourselves. In today's modern age, we all have technology at our fingertips, and there is no limit to what we can reveal to ourselves, to open our eyes and see everything that is going on. Right there. Did you catch that? If you did, then good for you. You're catching on. And if not, I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't have caught it either. A second ago, I said that we all have technology at our fingertips. That is not true. Many of us are blessed in that way, with what we have, but at the same time, there are some who cannot access these things. Those who cannot afford technology, for they can barely get food and clean water. Writer Hamilton Nolan made a good analogy in his piece, Do the Good Rich Exist, when discussing the rich of our society, that if money was food, those wealthy people would have more food than they could ever eat. Just this accumulated food that others need and could use, but it goes unshared. In our world, money is money, and oftentimes it sits and is held onto like a trophy. Our society has not yet deemed that a taboo. Yet again, I had never thought about that, at least not that way. It makes me wonder what the world would look like if I did everything I could, if the richest people in the world did everything they could. You cannot even begin to speculate about this level of equality, prosperity for everyone, unless you educate yourself. Who knew, right? The United States is often referred to as the greatest country in the world, and while that statement could be biased in so many different ways, The most important thing to remember is that the US is a huge offender in so many of these issues. Racism and capitalism are only to name a few. And yet these injustices know no borders. Now, ask yourself how much you know about the Iranian Revolution. Some may know nothing, others may know more. I can tell you, I knew almost nothing about it when I began reading Persepolis, a graphic novel about a 10-year-old girl living through the violence that took place in Iran. Upon reading it, I learned that it was a power struggle between religious groups and this fight for freedom among the people. Thus, in reading this, I've educated myself. I understand now. Except the thing about this story is that it was told through the eyes of a child who was forced to face the horrors of war and oppression of sexism and religious discrimination, and just a list of injustices that span 2 different books. Terrible things that should not have been brought upon anyone, let alone a child. And while the Iranian Revolution is over and this little girl is grown up, someone who is truly dedicated to trying to show themselves all the ugly truths of the world will know that there are children who face the same issues today. And not just children, but adults too. Women face blatant sexism to this day. Religion continues to be a large source of conflict. None of this is exempt in the great United States. Even when authors write fiction, they have these awfully truthful horrors of the past and present to use as a guide to write. The Color Purple by Alice Walker is a fiction piece about an African-American girl who finds herself growing up with an abusive father. She is then given away at such a young age to be married to another abusive man. The book follows her journey and her struggles, documenting her hardships. Things like this happened. Things like this happen. This is the ugly truth, one we can so easily not know about or even just turn a blind eye. It is so simple to believe that young girls are not essentially sold away and found in abusive households where they are violated over and over again. That the world today has changed, like I said at the beginning, and while I stand by that statement that the world is changing and is ever changing, all of this change has to be caused by something, and we are failing to engage in change for these injustices. The first step is simply identifying them. Women face circumstances too similar to those in The Color Purple today in human trafficking. It's a huge issue. And the fact of the matter is, racism plagues the world. Sexism scorches every inch of the globe. All kinds of abuse taints the earth. All of this is happening right now. We can no longer claim that we do not know, we cannot help. I apologize, but if you're watching or listening to this, you are now involved. But to be perfectly honest, I'm not sorry. And you shouldn't be either. This is a blessing. My ramblings about the endless injustices of the world hopefully opened your eyes, but the key is staying engaged. It's all connected. Once I realized that there was so much I didn't know, or so much that I wasn't doing, there's just no way I could stop. I encourage everyone to start with one thing that really affects you. For me, that one thing was a Netflix series. It was called When They See Us, and it retold the story of the Central Park Five, a group of 5 African-American boys who were wrongfully accused and convicted of a rape in Central Park. They were exonerated when the true attacker confessed years later. And in the series, it told the story of each boy. Most of them didn't even know each other. They were assaulted and coerced by police officers to confess, badgered and questioned without parents present. There was no justice. By the end of the film, we get to see an interview with the real men, now that they are grown. And despite their exoneration, the damage was clear, and it had already been done. One boy was 16 at the time. He was the oldest of the group. His name is Corey. Prosecution found it appropriate to try him as an adult because of his age. He was sent to prison at 16 years old. At one point, the show portrayed Corey lying naked in solitary confinement, staring at nothing. There was a blank look in his eyes that said something was wrong. In the post-show interview, he was asked how accurate the show portrayal was. In his response, I saw that similar look in his eyes as he informed everyone that it was almost everything. Almost perfect. That's when I couldn't take it anymore. My stomach was churning, my palms were getting sweaty, the lump in my throat was so big that I knew I couldn't stop it. I cried. I cried with people through my television, with people that I had never met. I cried and I cried to no end. I never heard about them until watching that. That was my thing. That was my moment. I now know that becoming educated is one thing. That means really opening your eyes to see the ugly in the world, something I hope I've conveyed well. Staying educated is simply not giving up. Knowing that these men were exonerated did not mean that there would never be another group or another person who needed the support that these boys did. This past year, I learned about a young man who was chased down and murdered by white supremacists for running. He was out for a simple run, just as anyone would do to stay in shape, just as I do in my own town, when 3 men felt the need to hunt him and shoot him at point blank multiple times. This young man's name was Ahmaud Arbery. I'll save you the story of how my tears kept me up that night, but I will tell you that the next day I signed a petition to get those men arrested. I signed another one to get the person filming locked up. I posted about it to spread the word. I asked those who could to call and demand the arrests be made. I made sure to give people the information to educate themselves and the tools to stay educated and engaged, to make a difference and push towards real justice. And while this may just seem like a long-winded speech about everyone doing their part, I hope that knowing my journey makes it a little easier for the next person. Until then, I wish you luck, and I wish you all the support that you may need on your own mission towards being a well-educated and involved citizen of the world. Until then, I should probably go put my laundry away. Thank you. Let's go. I'm out. Oh my god.